Okay guys, so this is going to be a little video setting up the connection of our controller. So we've already got the soldering done on the back and that's all wired through. What I'm going to do next is set up the other end of the cable. So you can see I've sort of cut back quite a bit of the space, so we've got a little bit of flexibility in those wires. But to be able to connect these up, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to be using some of the hookup wire, so the solid core wire, and stripping off a bit to attach and the other end to be able to plug into the board along there as well. So I want to be able to pull those off, and that's probably going to be easy as a little piece. So I'm going to basically go and tin each of those ends of our cable, so that's more than enough, and then I'm going to be able to then tin the end of this guy and solder those together. So that's the first step that I'm going to take now. So I'm just going to chop 7 little ends ready to go. So it doesn't really matter what color we pick for this one. I'm going to leave the other ends as it is. Might as well do the white. 2, 4, 6, and we'll do last one there. So each of those ready. I haven't cut off the other ends at the moment, so what I'm going to do is set up and tin each of the ends of these ones, and then I'm going to tin the ends of these guys and then attach them together. So fan on. Make sure that's a bit clean, and then spread these guys out so you have access to each cable. Heat from underneath, a little bit of solder on each of those. Okay, so each of those ends, that one just a little bit more, whiten it a little bit more, but we don't need it to be drowning, just enough that we can see the coating through there. So that's better. So now that end is good, I'm going to go through and add a little bit to each of these guys. Same deal, we don't need much, just a little bit so that when we attach them, just be a little bit careful after you do this because they do get a little bit of heat up. If you find you're getting too much, like a big ball on the end of that, just give it a little clean because he wants to be that nice shiny tip so that it adheres well to the solder. Okay, so this is a straightforward process, but again, we don't need the big blobs on there. So that one there's probably got a little bit too much. We'll roll with it and see how it goes. Alright, so they're all ready to go. So what I'm going to try next, spread these out a little bit so it makes my life a bit easier. Get access to each of them. So they're splayed out. What I should be able to do is they've both got solder, is go through, just heat him up a little bit, and that's there. Hold it in place. Red's over here. Okay. If you have a little bit of solder on the tip, it just helps transfer that heat a little bit more effectively. Again, don't need much, you can't see the bubble there at all, which is good. Okay, white. Okay, so that guy is not playing as nicely as the others. He might need a little bit more solder just to get him going. Sometimes it'll oxidize. Get that heated up a little bit. You can see if you leave it too long, it'll start heating the metal, like the solder, and it doesn't go. Okay, there we go. And then lucky last, I've got one more there. Again, if you could use your helping hands. So they are now all attached. We might use a little bit of heat shrink over the top, or just a little piece of tape to be able to clear that off. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim off, or hopefully trim off some of the end so that it can go into the breadboard. So each of those are now there ready to go. So what I can do next is I can start connecting those in. So obviously I would want to be able to add a little bit of heat shrink or the tape to those so that I don't have any crossover, because if they're sitting right next to each other, that will cross signals. So we do want to cover those solders up a little bit. I'm not going to do it here, but I might show one or two really quickly. Okay, so I've got each of those wrapped with a heat shrink at the moment. Again, tape will do just sufficient. But what I've got now is that the heat gun, and if I start going on these now, as it heats up, we'll see the heat shrink starting to shrink down, and it will then make a nice good seal for each of them. Okay, so they have now got good seal, other than one that's got a little bit of a hole in it, but that's now ready to go. So now if we start going through, we're able to then wire up and connect our board. So ground, I'm going to go straight into the side panel here, and hopefully what you've done is you've gone through and worked out what each of the coloured wires are on your controller, so then you can connect them up. The 5 volt, so the red is going to come through the power rail. So I'm going to come over there, and I'm going to then just keep adding in once I work out which pins each of these guys needs to be connected to. So if I have a look through, my 2 digital buttons are going to be my white and green, so they're going to come over to my 2 and 3. Again, you'll need to confirm what you've got based on your diagram. So I've got those guys there, that's looking good. And then my potentiometer is the yellow, so that's going to go to A0, which is just there. And then I've got my Y is brown, so that's going to go to A1, and then A2 is that final one there. So they are now sitting in ready to go. I can bend those down so they kind of stay out of the way a little bit. But that side of it now has got my controller, and I'm be able to then upload and do a test sketch to see that everything is doing what it needs to. Obviously, I still haven't got my wires to connect the voltage in or the power through to this guy either. So there's a couple extra steps that I still need to do to be able to connect effectively. So depending on which one as I use as my main power rail, so this one might be my input and I use this one as the 5 volt, or I might go the other way around. We will get onto that next step after this video.